What's up everyone? Today we're going to be taking a look at the Star Wars Black Series LucasFilm 50th Anniversary 6-inch action figure of George Lucas in the Stormtrooper disguise. Everything about this action figure is of course a homage. The packaging itself is a homage to the Kenner 3 3/4 action figure series, and the action figure is a homage to the creator George Lucas himself. The packaging looks great and definitely would be a great display for your collection. The card deco definitely calls out to the Kenner action figure series, with the Star Wars logo branding at the top in the middle, as well as the artwork of Stormtroopers down the side. As we move on to the back of the card, we see George Lucas over here on the set of A New Hope, description of the figure as a homage to George Lucas, the whole Lucasfilm 50th anniversary timeline of all the Star Wars movies, and finally product information at the bottom. And now we move back to the front to open this figure. The figure is of course packaged on a plastic tray, clearly displaying that nice head sculpt, a Stormtrooper helmet, as well as the Stormtrooper blaster. I saved the card backs for all the action figures that I have, so I just tear the plastic bubble off the card back. First up, we take a look at his blaster, and it is cast in a gunmetal grey plastic. And if you take a closer look, you can see a little bit of flecking in that plastic to give it a little bit of that shiny, shimmery sort of detail. The blaster is exactly the same sculpt as the one that came with the regular Stormtrooper 2.0. You can see the similar details like the pistol grip, the scope, as well as the barrel. Of course, the blaster fits into his right trigger hand just fine. The left hand is also suitably sculpted so that he can hold that blaster with his two hands. And his second accessory is of course his Stormtrooper helmet. It is cast in a white glossy plastic with the usual paint applications of the grey, the black around the lid, and some of the blue stripes down the side, and finally the silver over here just below his mouthpiece. As far as I can tell, the sculpt is exactly the same as the helmet on the Stormtrooper 2.0. The 2.0 helmet is a little yellow from sitting on my shelf for a while, but you can see that the sculpt is exactly the same. The paint applications also look the same across the entire helmet. However, I will point out that the paint for the eyepieces on the new helmet is actually improved. If you look at prop replicas of Stormtrooper helmets, you will notice that the eyepieces on the Stormtrooper helmet aren't actually entirely black, and Hasbro has improved that paint application on this new Stormtrooper helmet. You can see that the eyepieces are actually painted a very dark green, dark enough to look black, but you can see that it's actually green just like those prop replicas. And you can compare that with the older Stormtrooper 2.0 helmet, where the eyepieces are just plain dark black. The Stormtrooper helmet fits onto his head just fine, but you might take a little bit of work because the fit is really quite snug. And the helmet is appropriately sized so you don't see any of his beard peeking out from below the helmet. So onto the sculpt of the figure itself, it is exactly the same as the Stormtrooper 2.0, except of course it now has a brand new head sculpt. And Hasbro has done a great job with this brand new head sculpt, capturing the likeness of George Lucas in great detail. I will say though that George Lucas is about 5 feet 6 or 7, so having him on this body is a little too tall for his stature. Stormtroopers are supposedly about 5'10" to 6 feet tall. However, I can totally understand why this head sculpt is put on this body. With the helmet on, he could join your Stormtrooper legions. And it would really be a nice surprise once you lift the helmet off and say, hey, George Lucas is actually hiding in that legion of Stormtroopers. Zooming into this head sculpt, and it's clear that they have used this picture of George Lucas in his 50s as the main source material. The likeness is really well captured, and I'm really impressed with how they managed to get even the expression as well as the shape of his face. The hairpiece is a separate grey plastic, and that's glued onto his head and given that white dry brushing effect in order to get the grey haired look, but also to bring out the details in the waves of his hair. The rest of his head is cast in a flesh tone plastic, and Hasbro has used that dot matrix photoreal printing technique, so his eyebrows and his eyes as well as his lips are all printed on really sharply and accurately. The detail in sculpting is also really well executed on his face, and you can see the subtle lines that really show his age in his 50s. Along his jawline there's grey paint for the beard as well as that same white dry brush that similarly also brings out the texture in his beard. My only real criticism of this face is that George Lucas was a brunette with brown hair in his younger days. So his eyebrows are painted brown. but the brown is kind of mismatched with the gray on the rest of his beard as well as his hair. I think Hasbro could have used brown plastic for his hair and brown paint for his beard instead. However, that's really a small nitpick because I'm actually really pleased with the likeness and the sculpting detail on this head sculpt. On the rest of his body, his neck piece is cast in the black plastic. The torso is also cast in the black plastic with this white glossy plastic armor overlay on top. The shoulder pad is cast in the glossy white plastic as well as the rest of his arm, with hits of black paint around the top of the arm, the elbows. His hands are cast in the black plastic with a glossy white plastic armor overlay on the back of the hand. Around his abdomen area there's also hits of black paint to bring out some of that armor detail, and also a white plastic belt and crotch piece on the back of the figure. Similarly sharp details for the Stormtrooper armor on that armor plate, as well as grey paint on this white canister on his belt. Onto his lower body, it's also mostly black and white plastic. The hip piece is in black plastic, white plastic for his thigh piece, black paint over here at the knee joint, and more white plastic on his calf as well as his feet. And finally at the bottom of his feet, it's black paint. Now onto articulation, his head is on 2 ball joints at the top of his neck as well as the bottom of his neck, so that gets you a full 360 spin. Those 2 ball joints also give him great tilt sideways. He can look down quite well as up. There's butterfly joints in the shoulders so he can pull his arms backwards as well as forwards. Swivel hinge at the shoulders with the shoulder pad keyed into that joint so the arm goes all the way around together with the shoulder pad. The arm also goes out that far. There's a swivel just above the elbow joint for 360 spin, as well as a single hinge at the elbow that gets you past 90 degrees. There's a swivel hinge at the wrist for 360 spin, as well as the hinging inwards, as well as a little bit outwards. Because he has a trigger hand on the right side, that hinge moves down as well as up instead. He's got a ball joint at the torso, so that allows you to spin him 360. That ball joint also has decent range sideways, and you can also get him to bend forward that far as well as backward. There are ball joints at the hips that get you out that far as well as forward and backward. Swivel at the thigh so that lets you spin his leg outwards as well as inwards. Another swivel just above the knee joint so that lets you turn his leg inwards as well as outwards. Single hinge at the knee that gets you just slightly past 90 degrees, ankle tilt that goes up that far as well as down, and finally ankle pivot outwards as well as inwards. So it's definitely fun to have the creator himself posed like he's getting into Star Wars action himself. So I thought of head swapping Lucas's head onto this Marvel Legends Peter Parker body in order to get Lucas back into his more civilian clothing. However, Star Wars action figure heads are not made to swap. The socket for the ball joint in his head is really quite small and fits really tight on that ball. The only way you can pop his head off is to heat it and get it off. However, the ball joint on this Marvel Legends figure is also too big for this head. So squeezing his head onto this ball would make that head look really fat sideways, so I wouldn't advise that. The figure stands at just under 6 inches, and that's about 15 centimeters. For size comparisons, here he is with the Mafex Darth Vader and my own kit-bashed Black Series Luke Skywalker. Here he is with the deluxe Black Series Boba Fett with a custom posable cape and the flamethrower Stormtrooper. Here he is with Boba Fett from the Book of Boba Fett and Mando with Grogu, with Admiral Rampart and a clone trooper, and with Hunter and Wrecker from the Bad Batch. For comparisons with other lines, here he is with some Marvel Legends and G.I. Joe Classified series. This is a great figure with a fantastic head sculpt, capturing George Lucas's likeness very well. As a Star Wars action figure fan, I'm quite happy to have one of the most iconic sci-fi creators in figure form. The figure might be too tall for George Lucas, but it will be a cool surprise piece to have him disguised among your Stormtrooper battalion. I think this is a really fun addition to the collection and a nice homage piece whether you keep him on card or displayed loose. Please like and share this video, let me know what you think in the comments below, and subscribe to my channel for more toy reviews. Thanks for watching, take care and stay safe.